Something wasn't right about the house at the end of Pine Hollow Road. A family vanished without a single trace, and for a decade, the silence was unbroken, until one tiny detail suddenly stirred the town back to life. What happened behind those walls will keep you questioning everything until the very last second. Stay with us till the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that blur the line between mystery and reality. October 3rd, 2013, began like any other Thursday in Grayson Hollow. A drizzle had lingered since dawn, misting over the valley, making the cracked roads shine as if they'd been freshly paved. The Henderson family lived just past the last bend of Bellflower Lane, about half a mile beyond where the streetlights stopped and the gravel shoulders began. Their two-story farmhouse had stood there since the 1940s, wrapped in faded white siding and crooked shutters that had survived at least 3 generations. The mailbox at the bottom of their long dirt driveway tilted slightly forward, the red flag always down because no one ever used it. The family paid bills online, got all their packages delivered to the post office, and rarely received anything personal. Inside that old house, the day passed without incident. Elizabeth Henderson, 38, was home most of the time. A former nurse who had quit 3 years ago to care for their youngest, she spent her days cleaning, baking, folding laundry, trying to stretch the household budget. Her husband, Mark, 42, was a history teacher at Grayson High. Always home by 3:30, always walking in with a soft grunt, a distracted look in his eyes, and the same gentle kiss on her temple. They had 3 children, Emily, 12, Caleb, 9, and Noah, 4. Their lives weren't extraordinary, but they were full, ordinary in the way that made people envy their stability. That day, everything had gone on as usual. At 7:15 a.m., Elizabeth had walked Emily and Caleb down the driveway to the bus stop, a windbreaker zipped tight around her neck, coffee cups steaming in her hands. Emily had forgotten her lunchbox and bolted back up the driveway in socks, then ran back, waving to her mom just as the bus arrived. At 1:45 p.m., Elizabeth picked up Noah from preschool. He was clutching a wrinkled drawing of a green dog when she signed him out. She called Mark on the drive home and reminded him that dinner would be his favorite, meatloaf with roasted sweet potatoes. Mark said, "You're spoiling me," and she laughed. It was the last conversation they ever had. At 5:12 p.m., Mark pulled into the driveway and honked twice, a habit that had become their shorthand for, "I'm home, come help at the groceries." Elizabeth didn't come out. That wasn't strange. He assumed she was busy with the kids. He brought in the bags himself, hearing the hum of the washing machine from the basement. But the house was too quiet. There was no shouting, no kids tearing through the living room. He called, "Honey," but got no answer. The meatloaf was in the oven, halfway cooked. Steam curled from a pot of green beans on the stovetop, simmering unattended. Noah's juice cup sat on the floor near the couch, half full. The laundry machine thumped in the basement, but no footsteps followed. At first, Mark thought they'd gone for a walk, maybe to the neighbors. But the family car was still in the driveway. Elizabeth's purse and keys were still on the kitchen table. Emily's backpack was open near the stairs, a worksheet half finished on the floor. Mark walked through the house, checking each room. The front door was locked. The back door, too. All the windows latched. Every coat still hung on the hallway rack. Shoes untouched by the door. Not a single sign of movement. At 5:28 p.m., Mark called Elizabeth's cell phone. It rang once from somewhere inside the house, then stopped. He followed the sound and found her phone on the nightstand in their bedroom. He picked it up, but the screen was dark. At 5:35, he called her again. Then Caleb's tablet. Then Emily's cheap flip phone. All were inside the house, silenced, dead or off. By 6:12 p.m., he'd called the neighbors. No one had seen them. He walked up and down the road in the drizzle, calling their names, shouting through the trees. He returned to the house twice, thinking maybe he'd missed something. He tore open closets, looked under beds, screamed into every room. By 7:04, he called the police. When Officer Grant arrived at 7:43 p.m., Mark was pacing the living room barefoot. His socks were soaked. He was mumbling to himself, hands trembling. They're not in the house. They didn't leave the house. But they're not here. The officer, initially calm, took one sweep through the home and called him back up. By 9:30 p.m., the house was surrounded with cruisers, lights flashing silently through the fog. Dogs were brought in from the next county over. They caught no scent, no broken window, no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen, nothing out of place. It was as if the family had simply vanished mid-step. The police pulled security footage from a gas station down the road. Nothing. They combed through the digital calendars, call logs, internet history. All normal. Mark was interrogated, tested, monitored, cleared. Elizabeth had no enemies. The children had no mental health history, no signs of abuse. CPS records were spotless. No ransom note, no signs of struggle. The town changed overnight. For days, search parties scoured the surrounding woods. Helicopters hovered over cornfields. Volunteers wore orange vests and carried flashlights and whistles. By day 5, national media arrived. By day 10, the story had spread internationally. But there were no answers. The only peculiar detail, barely mentioned, was the mailbox. The red flag had been up that morning. Mark had noticed it when he left for work, then forgot about it. But when police checked it that night, it was down. No one remembered lowering it. No mail had been sent or received. The flag, like everything else, became a dead end. For the next few months, Mark barely left the house. Police let him stay, though it remained an open crime scene. Reporters came and went. Psychics sent him letters. Strangers blamed him online. He stopped responding, stopped shaving, stopped eating. By March 2014, the school had replaced him. He slept in the children's rooms, rotating night by night. Sometimes he thought he heard their voices behind the walls, muffled and distant. Sometimes he'd find toys in odd places, a stuffed frog on the porch swing, a doll upright on the basement steps. He thought he was losing his mind. He didn't care. Elizabeth's family pressured him to move back with them. He refused. What if they come back? He'd say. What if they're just stuck somewhere? He hung their jackets back on the hooks. He repacked their school bags. He reboiled green beans. Year 1 passed. Then 2. Then 3. In the 4th year, he stopped sleeping upstairs. The room smelled like dust and detergent. The kitchen light flickered. The washing machine broke. The floors warped. He kept the house clean, but never fixed anything. In the 6th year, October 3rd, 2019, he woke up with a headache. The house was silent. Sunlight streamed through the slats of the blinds. He walked down the stairs and opened the front door without thinking. And there it was, the mailbox flag, up. He stood still for a full minute, the wind catching the hem of his flannel shirt. The mailbox was 50 feet away, but it felt miles. No one had visited. No delivery truck had passed. He walked barefoot across the gravel, heart thumping, mouth dry. He opened the box. It was empty. No letter. No package. No flyer. But the flag was up. He called the police again. They came. They checked it for prints. None. They pulled footage from the traffic cam, installed 3 months prior by the town council. At 3:14 a.m., the camera caught the silhouette of a child standing beside the mailbox. The figure stood for 6 seconds. Then the flag lifted on its own, slow and deliberate. The figure never moved. Then it disappeared. The footage was corrupted after that frame. They tried to enhance it. The face was turned away, blurred, grainy. Mark swore it was Caleb, but that was impossible, because Caleb had vanished 6 years ago, and the house hadn't given up its secrets. Not yet. They say time heals all wounds, but whoever said that never spent 10 years staring at an empty driveway, waiting for headlights that never appeared. For the first few years, the Carringtons' house stood like a shrine to absence. Porch lights always on, curtains never drawn, mailbox emptied daily by a trembling hand. After year 5, the grass grew longer. The shutters hung looser, and the house, once warm with laughter, began to look like what it truly was, a tomb for the living. Peter Carrington aged faster than grief should allow. His black hair turned white within a year. His once proud frame stooped like he was carrying the weight of his vanished bloodline on his back. Margaret fared worse. In the months after the disappearance, she stopped speaking altogether, her voice retreating into silence like a wounded animal into its den. It returned only on anniversaries, and even then, only to whisper her children's names as she placed yellow lilies beneath their school portraits. Detective Ruiz had been reassigned 3 times since that terrible July night in 2015, but the case never left him. Not because he believed the children were still alive, but because it never made sense. 3 kids do not vanish from their beds. Clothes untouched, toys in place, dogs still sleeping on the couch, and leave no trace. There had been no signs of forced entry. No neighbor saw a car. No traffic cams caught anything suspicious. Nothing. That was the word that haunted Ruiz. Nothing. No footprints. No ransom notes. No sightings. Just a family dissolved. Then came his 6th year. In late autumn 2021, Ruiz got a phone call from Margaret. Her voice frail, unsure, like she was waking from a long dream. Her exact words chilled him. The mailbox flag is up. He didn't understand at first. It had been years since she called him. She repeated herself, this time firmer. No one's lived here for years. No one sends us mail. But the flag is up. I didn't put it up. Peter didn't. He drove to the Carrington house in under an hour. Leaves skittered across the empty road as he pulled into the cracked driveway. Sure enough, the rusted red flag on the black mailbox was raised high. Ruiz approached it slowly, every step pressing down on years of buried questions. He opened the box. Inside was a single white envelope. No stump, no return address. Just 2 words on the front, written in block letters with a heavy hand. I remember. Ruiz didn't open it right away. He bagged it, took it back to the precinct, and had it processed. No fingerprints. No DNA, but the letter inside. I remember everything now. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I wasn't supposed to see what I saw. I didn't mean to leave them behind. But I did. And I can't live like this anymore. You'll find the truth beneath what rots. That was it. No signature. No date. Just cryptic lines that pointed nowhere, yet screamed meaning. Ruiz read it 20 times. The phrase beneath what rots circled his brain like a buzzard. The backyard. He drove back to the house that same night. The backyard had once been a child's kingdom. Plastic slides, chalk drawings, a sandbox. Now it was a wasteland of weeds, vines, and deadwood. He walked the perimeter with a flashlight, sweeping the overgrowth. Then he saw it. An old compost bin toppled near the back fence. Its lid half open, revealing layers of decayed leaves, food scraps, and something odd, gray cloth. Ruiz reached in, pulling gently. The fabric gave way to something heavier. A child's shoe. A small, pink, glittery sneaker with a broken Velcro strap. Still damp. Still reeking faintly of soil. He staggered back, adrenaline surging. Forensics were called in the next morning. They unearthed the bin, layer by layer. Alongside the shoe, they found a few plastic beads, a rusted lunchbox, and bones. But not human. Animal bones, most likely from a raccoon or possum. The disappointment stung, but Ruiz held onto the one thing that mattered, the shoe. It had belonged to the youngest Carrington, Anna. Margaret identified it immediately, her knees buckling as she held it to her chest. Something had happened in that yard. Something someone was finally ready to confess. Days passed. Margaret began sitting outside again, near the edge of the lawn, as if waiting for someone to come down the old dirt path behind the fence. Peter, meanwhile, took to restoring the mailbox, painting it, oiling the hinges. It became a symbol now, a message board from whatever force held the answers. Then, 2 weeks later, another note arrived. This one wasn't in the mailbox. It was wedged into the doorframe, folded neatly like a letter to Santa. I saw where they went. I followed them through. There was no door, just mist. But they called my name. They were laughing. I should have gone back. But I didn't. Now I want to. This time, Ruiz ordered the entire area scanned for fingerprints. Nearby woods, fence posts, rocks. Nothing. Except, near the shed, they found a handprint. A child's handprint. Faint, smeared, and oddly fresh. That same week, Margaret began to speak more. Not to people, necessarily, but to the house. She would sit in the living room at night and whisper stories from when her children were small. She swore she heard giggles. The dog, now old and mostly blind, began pacing near the hallway again, just like it did the night the children vanished. Ruiz, haunted and unsure, called in a friend, a retired profiler named Dana Lynch. She had dealt with cult disappearances and psychological breakdowns. She reviewed the case, notes, and letters. Her verdict was chilling. This wasn't an abduction. This wasn't foul play. This was a crossing. Ruiz stared at her. She elaborated. There are cases, rare ones, where disappearances are tied to mass hallucinations, psychological breakage, shared trauma. But there's an intelligence behind these letters. Someone out there knows something, and they're trying to remember. Margaret began keeping a candle lit in the children's bedroom every night. One night, Peter forgot to blow it out before bed. Around 2 a.m., the fire alarm shrieked. They rushed in to find the room filled with smoke, but the candle was unlit, its wax unmelted. On the window, words had appeared in the condensation. They remember. Part of Ruiz wanted to declare it a hoax, maybe even self-inflicted. But deep down, he knew something was unspooling, something too big, too strange, and too patient to rush. He returned the next morning to check the mailbox. Nothing inside. But just as he turned to leave, he noticed something small tucked between the rocks at the base. A Polaroid, a photo of the 3 Carrington children, aged exactly as they were 10 years ago, standing in what looked like a foggy forest clearing, smiling. Their eyes were wide, almost too wide, and one of them, Michael, the eldest, was pointing at something just beyond the frame. On the back of the photo, written in smudged ink, "Come find us before the door closes again." They arrived at the edge of Glenridge Hollow just after dawn. The forest loomed, unchanged, like a still photograph of the day they'd first searched it, trees heavy with moss, a silence that felt too deliberate, an air thick with damp decay. Leonard clutched the faded map Officer Jensen had marked years ago. Areas scoured and cleared, areas deemed inaccessible. Yet now, they were returning with one small clue that upended everything, a footprint in dry soil where no one had walked in a decade. Willa had barely slept. She hadn't eaten. Her bones ached, and her hands trembled with the same anticipation that had destroyed her sanity once before. But something was different this time. She could feel it, like a hum beneath her skin, just faint enough to doubt, yet strong enough to make her believe they were close, closer than they'd ever been. They split from the sheriff's deputy at the trail fork, determined to retrace the backwoods path they'd stumbled through 10 years ago. Willa held her breath at every branch that creaked, every shifting shadow that leaned toward her. But it wasn't until they reached the collapsed fire tower, long since rotted through, that Leonard paused, his eyes narrowing. "Do you smell that?" he whispered. She did, a strange, sweet, metallic scent, like rust and lavender. Out of place. Wrong. They crept forward, following it until they came to a clearing too circular to be natural. The grass had been trampled into a spiral pattern. In the center stood a rusting mailbox. Its flag was up. They stared. Neither of them spoke. The mailbox wasn't just old, it was their mailbox. The one from their front yard, identical down to the chipped blue paint and the dent near the bottom. But how? Who had placed it here? And why? Leonard approached slowly, almost reverently. Willa stayed frozen at the edge of the clearing, a sick feeling rising in her chest. He opened the mailbox. Inside was a stack of envelopes, aged and yellowed, each addressed in childish handwriting. They were letters from the children, postmarked but never mailed. The ink had bled from years of moisture, but some words were still legible. "Dear Mommy, we can't come back yet. Daddy tried to dig, but the floor keeps moving. There are no windows, but I see you sometimes through the trees. Don't forget the code. Asterisk." Willa collapsed to her knees. A memory slammed into her. The night before they disappeared, she had tucked them in and said, "If you ever get lost, remember our code." They made it up years ago. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. A secret way to always find their way back. Leonard knelt beside her, reading more. "We miss the sun. They only let us out when it rains. I think it's underground, Mommy. But there's a crack in the wall now. Asterisk. She covered her mouth. The tears that came weren't loud. They were silent. Broken. Deputy Harris called from beyond the trees. Over here. We found something. They followed the voice until they saw what he had found. A concrete hatch, moss-covered, buried beneath a mound of leaves and roots. A latch was rusted over. Harris tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. Leonard brought over a metal crowbar from the car. It took 3 grown men to snap the rusted lock. The hatch groaned as it opened, releasing a gust of air that smelled like damp paper and something fouler, like mold and stagnant time. A narrow tunnel descended into the earth. Concrete walls, flashlights swallowing darkness, and a spiral staircase that disappeared beyond sight. They stood there, unwilling to move for nearly a minute. Then Willow went first. She gripped the flashlight so tightly her knuckles went white. Every step echoed, clanging into the abyss below. After what felt like an eternity, the staircase ended at a hallway. Long, narrow, with doors lining each side. Each had a child's drawing taped to it. Some torn, some so faded they were indistinguishable. But one still showed 3 smiling stick figures standing in front of a tree. Willa's breath hitched. That was their tree, the old oak in their backyard. She reached for the handle. It was locked. Leonard moved past her to try the next one. Locked. Another. Locked. Then, halfway down, one door stood slightly ajar. It creaked as he pushed it open. Inside was a small room. A mattress on the floor. Toys scattered about. A battery-operated lantern with dying light. And on the wall, drawn in charcoal or some kind of ash, was the same spiral pattern from the clearing above. Willow whispered. They were kept here. Leonard pointed to the far corner. Look, a hole, dug out of the wall, just wide enough for a small child. It led into darkness. Claw marks lined the edges. Recent. Deputy Harris radioed in for backup. They began documenting everything, snapping photos, collecting samples. But nothing could explain why there were no bodies, no belongings, no signs of human life beyond the letters and the digging. Forensics confirmed the children's fingerprints were all over the mailbox and letters. But there was no DNA from anyone else. No captors. No neighbors. Nothing. The town erupted. News vans returned. Speculation reignited. Online forums exploded with theories, cult involvement, underground trafficking rings, psychological experiments. But none could explain the precision of the hiding place or the mailbox's sudden reappearance. The family's mailbox had been in storage for years. It had gone missing in 2018, but no one thought much of it. That was the year the footprint appeared. A journalist reached out, claiming someone had anonymously submitted a map overlay of Glenridge Hollow, only visible under infrared. It marked 3 other hatches in the area. Authorities investigated each. 2 were decoys, but the 3rd contained a makeshift nursery. Bottles, diapers, a rocking chair that played music when you wounded. The song? You Are My Sunshine. Willow remembered singing that every night before bed. But there were no signs of the children. No skeletal remains. No trace. Just evidence they had once been there, and recently. 10 years after their vanishing, Willa and Leonard sat in their living room again, staring at the now empty mailbox returned by authorities. I think they're still alive, Willa whispered. Leonard didn't respond. He stared at the window, frozen. Willa turned to look. On the far end of the lawn, next to the old oak, stood a child. Pale, thin, wearing the same striped shirt their youngest had worn the night he vanished. When Willa blinked, he was gone. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked outside, placed the flag up on the mailbox, and whispered the family code. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Then she waited, and the wind answered back. The snow fell thick that morning. Silent and absolute, like the world itself had paused. Elaine stood across the street, staring at the mailbox in front of the Hartford house. The red flag was up again. It had been 10 years since the family disappeared, for years since the flag first rose without explanation, and only 1 day since it had done it again. The last time it happened, a pair of scorched photographs were found inside. This time, there was no key in the lock. The box was unlocked. Empty. But someone had raised the flag. Elaine hadn't slept. No one had. Not after the discovery in the crawl space beneath the house. They had pulled out boxes that should not have existed. Diaries. Audiocassettes. A collection of VHS tapes dated and labeled with chilling specificity. Ben, second grade talent show. Olivia's crying fit. 3 a.m. Dream study. Attempt number 4. Elaine had recognized her daughter's handwriting on one of the labels. But they didn't own a video camera back then. They couldn't have. They never bought one. By noon, investigators had roped off the street again. The FBI was back. Not with helicopters or dogs this time. This time, they came with forensic psychologists and teams specializing in coercive behavioral environments. One agent, a woman in her 40s with a worn leather satchel and tired eyes, approached Elaine with a tape in her hand. "We need you to see something," she said. Privately, Elaine followed her into the house. Her old house, its walls still bearing the scent of long-forgotten warmth, now mixed with mildew and something older, fouler. The agent inserted the tape into a small monitor and pressed play. The video was grainy, handheld. The room on the screen was the family's old living room. Olivia was seated cross-legged on the carpet, staring straight into the camera. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her eyes were red from crying. Day 11. A voice behind the camera whispered, "State your name." "Olivia Hartford." The little girl said, barely audible, "Do you want to go home?" The girl nodded. "You are home." The screen flickered. A new date appeared. Day 37. Now Ben sat beside Olivia. They both looked thinner, paler. "Mom and Dad?" Olivia asked. A deep exhale from behind the camera. "They don't know you're here." Elaine could barely breathe. The agent reached out, pausing the tape. These weren't just hidden. Someone took the family and kept them here, beneath the house. For months, maybe longer. "But we searched this place for years," Elaine said, trembling. "We had cadaver dogs. Ground-penetrating radar. How could they have missed them? We think the crawl space was sealed off again after they were moved, or perhaps they were never physically here. Some of these recordings reference things we can't explain yet. Sleep studies, time lapses, conditioning cycles. Someone went to great lengths to document these children without leaving a single digital footprint." Elaine stood up, the floor creaking beneath her. "You think someone was experimenting on them?" The agent nodded solemnly. "And they might still be." The revelation shook the town harder than the original disappearance. The media caught on within 48 hours. Satellite trucks returned. Conspiracy théoriste Fluded Forum. Former neighbors were questioned again. Old friends re-interviewed. A retired local professor surfaced, claiming he remembered a government grant proposal from the late 90s, something involving extended consciousness mapping in juvenile subjects. No one could find records of the grant. Then came the letter. It arrived at the police station. No return address, no fingerprints. Just a typed sheet, signed with a symbol resembling an inverted tree. The message was clear. "Stop digging. They're not yours anymore." The handwriting was clean, precise, terrifying. For Elaine and Thomas, it reignited the terror they had worked so hard to bury. That night, Thomas drank until he collapsed. Elaine sat on their back porch with the old baby monitor she had kept all these years. The static had always been silent. But now, for the first time in a decade, a sound crackled through. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. Then a child's whisper, "Mom?" The FBI isolated the audio. It matched Olivia's voice from the tapes. 2 nights later, something happened that changed everything. A car was found idling outside the old Hartford house. Engine running, keys in the ignition. No driver. Inside the glove box, agents found a flash drive. On it, a single video file, release protocol /_23. The footage showed a hallway, concrete walls, flickering fluorescent lights. A man in a white coat walked down it slowly, opening a series of numbered doors. Behind each, a room, each one slightly different. A jungle gym, a padded chamber, a library with no windows. Children sat quietly in each, their expressions blank, unblinking. The final room contained Olivia. She was now 17. She stood beside a cot, hands folded in front of her. "Do you remember your parents?" the man asked. She blinked once. "Define remember. What do you want to tell them?" She looked into the camera. "The mailbox flag means I'm ready." Ready for what? That question haunted everyone. Theories spread like fire. Government mind control. Off-grid cults. Some whispered about Project Lantern, a rumored black-budget experiment in memory deletion. But no one was ready for what came next. 3 days after the video leaked, a man claiming to be a former technician from the facility turned himself in. He didn't give his name, only handed over a map, drawn by hand, showing a vast underground complex 2 states over. "You won't find them there now," he said, "but it's where they started." He died of a heart attack in custody that night. Still, authorities searched the location. They found nothing. No entrance. No access points. But beneath the soil, they uncovered massive fiber optic cabling, miles of it, interrupted by a single sealed door encased in concrete. They're still trying to open it. Meanwhile, the mailbox flag went up again. This time, inside was a Polaroid. It showed Olivia standing in the exact spot where the picture was found. Same mailbox, same snow, same stare. She was alive. But in the background stood another figure. Ben. He looked different, older. But something was off. His eyes were too dark, his smile too still. As if he'd forgotten how to be human. Elaine knew. Deep down, she knew they had been changed. Not harmed, not murdered. Changed. As if someone or something had restructured them from the inside out. To this day, no one knows who raised the mailbox flag. The house has been under constant surveillance. No one's seen entering, no one exiting. But every winter, without fail, the red flag rises. And every winter, another message appears. Short, cold, final. They remember you. Do you still remember them? Elaine does. And she's still waiting.